Hi, I'm Ron Demise with the School Perceptions team, and I will be presenting the School District of Spring Valley's summary report for their planning survey conducted earlier this winter. School Perceptions, we got our start in 2002, and since then, our mission has never once changed. Our goal is to help education leaders gather, organize, and use data to make strategic decisions. We've conducted over 3 million staff, parent, student, and community surveys, all in the name of school improvement, and we've helped more than 1,000 school districts navigate the strategic planning and referendum planning processes. For the School District of Spring Valley's report, we're going to begin with a section that we actually have longitudinal data for relative to Spring Valley's previous survey a couple of years ago. So we call this the overall satisfaction section. The question specifically read, how is the district doing in each of the following areas? The scale was 1 to 4. The perfect score was 4, great. The bottom score was 1 at 4. And items are sorted by the percent change from the last time that Spring Valley asked these questions on a survey. And you can see the results here. So respondents were asked to rate the district in 4 areas. Those areas being A, delivering a high quality education, B, keeping the public informed, C, building pride in the community, and D, managing funds appropriately. What we can see is for those first 3 that you see listed here, Spring Valley grew relative to where they were last time. The district saw 4.2% growth in terms of the score for delivering a high quality education, nearly 3% growth in terms of the rating for keeping the public informed, and approximately 2.5% growth in terms of building pride in the community. Just a slight decline, a little under 1% in terms of the community's perception of how the district manages funds and whether it's appropriate. The column all the way to the right and is going to pop up as we go throughout the survey report here. We call that our comparison column. So what this is telling you is the percentage of districts that Spring Valley is outperforming on a particular item. So for instance, on the item delivering a high quality education, because the district is at the 84th percentile, it means that the district is outperforming 84% of other districts in their comparison pool. So just to establish a baseline here, if Spring Valley were outperforming everybody else, the percentile would be the 99th. If Spring Valley was behind everybody else, the percentile would be at the first. If Spring Valley is right smack dab in the middle of the data set, half of districts are doing better, half of districts are doing worse, then the percentile is the 50th. So in other words, for that comparison column, the higher the better. But again, that is showing you the percentage of districts that Spring Valley is outperforming in their comparison pool. 3 of the 4 items here are above the median, again, meaning that Spring Valley is outperforming most other districts in their comparison pool. Once again, the 84th percentile for delivering a high quality education, the 55th and 56th percentiles, respectively, for keeping the public informed and building pride in the community, and the 37th percentile in terms of managing funds appropriately. Also part of that overall satisfaction question was this. On a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? The current score for Spring Valley is 7.40 relative to the previous score at 6.95. Once again, we're seeing growth here to the tune of a 6.5% growth compared to where you were last time. And Spring Valley is outperforming almost 3/4 of other school districts in their comparison pool. More specifically, Spring Valley is outperforming 72% of other districts in their comparison pool. Next, we turn to the community index analysis. We're going to revisit indexes multiple times, whether it's community here, staff later on, parents later on. But indexes are designed to provide education leaders with a snapshot of the results. And these indexes are built by key questions for all the respondents in the survey. And I'll show you what questions built these indexes in just one moment. But before I do so, I just want to note the change in scale. The perfect score is 5, because in an ideal world, everybody would be strongly agreeing with all the items here. The worst score is 1 if everybody strongly disagrees with every item. So the middle of that scale, the middle of the 1 to 5 scale, is 3.00. So often when I'm eyeballing this data for the first time, that's what my eyes do, is to scan the data to see if any items are above or below 3. especially if the item is below 3, that will catch my eyes because that signals to me that most folks are disagreeing with a particular answer. So let's take a look at what some of these community indexes were. This is the first time that Spring Valley has asked these type of questions. So here, there is no previous score to base the data off of. Instead, we have where Spring Valley is currently performing. And then once again, similar idea, the percentage of districts that Spring Valley is outperforming. So the first index is communications. The community hears from and feels listened to by our schools. The second index is climate. The climate in our schools is safe and supportive. The third index is leadership. Educational leaders are taking necessary steps to improve our schools. And then finally, academics. Our schools effectively prepare students for life after graduation. First blush here, what I'm looking to see, once again, based on the previous slide, are just the raw scores. And all of them are above 3. So again, just as a reminder, that's the right side of the fence that you want to be on, because in aggregate, respondents are agreeing with all of the indexes here. So once again, I really want to focus on whether the score is above or below 3, and Spring Valley is above 3 on all of these. One that's really sticking out for high performance is a score of 4.00, the climate in Spring Valley schools. You can also see that Spring Valley is outperforming about 2/3 to 3/4 of other districts in their comparison pool, meaning that Spring Valley is outperforming most other districts. There's only a handful that are outperforming Spring Valley. More specifically, Spring Valley is outperforming about 2/3 of other districts in terms of communications, climate, and leadership, and outperforming 78% of other districts in terms of academics. Let's take a look, though, at the questions that feed those indexes. On the survey, this section was called feedback. Each item began with the words the district, XYZ. The scale remained the same. Best is 5, worst is 1, and items are sorted by Spring Valley's current score. The slides also include the percentage of respondents who agree or strongly agree with any particular item and the comparison percentile. Once again, though, because this is the first time that Spring Valley has asked these type of questions, there is no longitudinal data to provide. We're going to have multiple slides here, again, sorted by the district's current score. So pooling all respondents together, respondents gave the highest score to whether the district is employing high quality teachers and staff. 91% of folks agreed or strongly agreed with that item for a score at 4.15, and Spring Valley is outperforming 85% of other districts on that metric. Two other scores that are north of 4. So now we're getting pretty clearly into that strongly agree area. Great place to be. Over 9 in 10 respondents agree or strongly agree that Spring Valley is maintaining safe and secure schools, and 9 in 10 respondents believe that the district has high expectations for students. In terms of percentiles, Spring Valley is outperforming 84% of other districts on maintaining safe and secure schools and outperforming 90% of other districts on the expectations that they have for students. At a score of 3.91 with 86% agreement and the 73rd percentile, Spring Valley preparing students for education after high school, such as tech school or college. And then above the median, but at the 58th percentile, Spring Valley has the support of the community. A few other slides from this particular section at the 67th percentile, so outperforming approximately 2/3 of other districts in the comparison pool. At a score of 3.89, the district prepares students for potential careers. Followed closely by 1/100th of a point, the district develops students' character at the 81st percentile. Two items that have the same score at 3.82 and the same percentage of folks that are agreeing or strongly agreeing. The district provides me with opportunities to offer feedback, and the district effectively partners with local businesses and community members. Here, the comparison percentile had quite a bit of variation. Spring Valley is outperforming 80% of other districts in terms of providing me with opportunities to offer feedback, but at the 40th percentile for the district effectively partnering with local businesses and community members. Back above the median, i.e. Spring Valley is outperforming most other districts. The district has a website that is an effective place for me to learn about what's going on at school, with approximately 3/4 agree or strongly agree with that. Another set of 4, the district communicates with me effectively at a score of 3.74, 69th percentile. Exact same percentage, 78% agree or strongly agree that administration is doing what it takes to make our district successful. That's at the 64th percentile. So what you'll see here across this slide is the district is outperforming about 2/3 of other districts-ish on any one of these metrics. About 3/4 of folks agree or strongly agree that Spring Valley is heading in the right direction. And then finally, at a score of 3.60, the school board is doing what it takes to make our district successful. Again, about 3/4 agree at the 66th percentile. So just summing up that data that we just went through, the good news there is that none of the items were below 3. Spring Valley put themselves in quite a good position here. All of the items were well north of 3 for that matter, meaning that on any given item, most folks agree or strongly agree with what's there. This is going to look a little bit different, even though it's the same question. So we're still looking at the feedback section by subgroup. Each item still began with the words "the district," still looking at the same scores and scale. Here, instead of looking at all respondents together, we are breaking it apart by subgroup. So in this case, there's staff, there's parents, and there's non-parents, non-staff. Each subgroup gets their own column. Here, what I would encourage you to do if you're viewing the data, there's about 15 scores-ish on each slide. That's a substantial amount of data to go through. What I would recommend at this point, if you're viewing it, is to pause your video and just take a look at each row to see which group is rating the district highest or lowest on any particular item. And then to take a look once again to see if any item is below 3. Once again, because if any item is below 3, that means in aggregate, that group is leaning towards disagreement. Now, the good news here is that there are no items that are below 3. I just wanted to remind you what we often look at when we're looking at the data for the first time. Spring Valley is in quite a good position. There are a substantial number of staff scores that are getting into that strongly agree range, especially you can see here in terms of maintaining safe and secure schools. In the name of transparency, I wanted to be upfront that this data was here, but because there are so many numbers, I didn't want to read them number by number and row for row. But again, I would encourage you to pause your video at this point on each one of these slides to take a look at what each group is saying and what that rating is. Otherwise, because it's the same section, there are the same number of items. Once again, if you'd like to look across each group, now would be a great time to pause your video and see how each group is rating each one of these items. And then finally here as well, one more set of items if you'd like to pause your video to see how which group has the widest variation, which group is rating each item the highest and lowest, is there discrepancy, is there variation, and so on. Let's take a look at the next section of the survey. This was the communications section. So first thing the survey asked was, we want to make sure our communications are useful and relevant for you. What topics are you interested in learning more about? And this was a select all that apply. What I'm looking at here are the items across all respondents that breached majority. In other words, 71% of folks said they are interested in learning more about the district's goals and plans. 2/3 of respondents are interested in facility improvement plans. 62% of respondents are interested in school finance and budget information. 57% are interested in student achievements and successes. 55% for school safety and security. And 51% of folks are interested in school board policy updates and changes. You can see there's substantial interest across all of the items here, but just in order to narrow the focus, I was looking at items that are, again, above majority in terms of what all respondents want. And those are the 6 or so where that is above 50%. While that's all respondents, I then wanted to take a look at, is there variation across what each group wants to know? So I went back to those 3 familiar subgroups. I said, which of those items on the previous slide, what do staff want to know about? What do parents want to know about? And then what do non-parents, non-staff want to know about? In other words, what I did is I said, just show me staff in isolation and give me their rank. What are they most interested in knowing about to least interested in knowing about? I did that same exercise for parents. And then I did that same exercise for non-parents, non-staff. So I had 3 lists, one for each group, ranged from highest to lowest in terms of what each group wanted to know more about. And then I asked myself, well, are there overlaps here? Are there some things that all the groups want to know about? And the answer was yes. Any of those items where all the groups were interested in learning more, I bolded and put in blue. I did want to point that out because there's a couple of other slides that are going to look like this. So I just wanted to be very clear on how we ended up with this data. But once again, we isolated each group and ranked what they wanted to know about from most interested to least interested, and then looked for highlights across those lists. So in other words, what this is saying is all three subgroups are interested in knowing more about the district's goals and plans. All three groups want to know about facility improvement plans. All three groups want to know about student achievements and successes. And all three groups want to know about school finance and budgets. So you do have a lot of overlap here. That's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes staff want to know about certain things, parents want to know about certain things, and perhaps non-staff want to know about a different set of things, which means that the district can cater that information depending on which group is most interested in it. Here, it's going to be more bang for your buck, I think, because of the overlap among what all subgroups want to know about. Overall, how would you rate communications from the district? 19% of respondents gave the district a great, 45% said good, 26% said fair, 9% said it was poor, and 1% said they were not sure or had no opinion about the district communications. The score, based on that question, was a 2.74, putting Spring Valley almost right smack dab in the middle of the data set. So approximately half of districts are doing better than Spring Valley, and approximately half of districts are doing worse than Spring Valley. So Spring Valley here has a pretty average score. Planning priorities. Similar structure, similar type of question, but this one read, where do you believe we should focus our improvement efforts and priorities over the next 5 years? Choose up to 4. I approached it based on the same principle. What items across all respondents are above majority? And here there is much more clear data. Respondents really want the district to focus on helping students develop life skills. Things like budgeting would be a good instance to that, good example of that. There were additional examples in the survey itself. And then what can often be very related, career and technical education, or things like shop courses. Those really blew the other ones out of the water. 51 and 56% support for CTE and life skills courses. So pretty clear direction on what the community is looking for in terms of the priority setting for the district. Everything else was substantially below those items. Rounding off towards the bottom, where respondents are less concerned about the district prioritizing its efforts, student transportation, online distance or virtual course offerings, or things like math achievement or foreign language courses. Now, an important note here, especially because math achievement is towards the bottom. This data purposefully did not ask for an evaluation. In other words, it didn't go through each of these and say, how are we doing? Rather, it said, where should we put our time, energy, money, and resources? So there are two ways to answer that question or look at the data. If, for instance, the district is already doing quite well in terms of math achievement, I might say, well, you're already doing well. Maybe additional time, money, or energy isn't well spent in that area because things are already going well. Let's try to improve other areas. So it could float towards the bottom. The other side of that coin is also true. Near the top, where there are CTE courses that respondents really want the district to focus on, those could already be going very, very well. And folks might say, yep, let's keep that train on the tracks. Let's make sure it continues to stay going well. Let's put our priorities into that area. So the wrong way to read this data is by saying what's going well or what's not going well. The only way to read this data on purpose is to say, if there are finite hours in a day, dollars in the piggy bank, and so on, where should we put those time, money, energy, and resources? That's what this data is telling you here. Similar exercise. We looked at the same 3 subgroups and said, well, are we getting common results from each? The answer is yes, but a little bit more variation than the last time I had this type of slide up. All 3 groups, staff, parents, and non-parents, non-staff, their top items to focus were life skills and CTE or shop courses. Staff were also interested in the district prioritizing mental health, community business partnerships, and a wider range of courses for students. Parents are also interested in community business partnerships and college credit opportunities. They are also interested in prioritizing school safety and security. Non-parents, non-staff, they're asking the district to prioritize college credit opportunities, recruiting and retaining high quality staff, and communications with parents and the community. So again, some variation here, but at the end of the day, the homework is pretty clear. Respondents are telling the district to focus on life skill development and CTE or SHOP courses. Once again, similar structure, graduate success. We know Spring Valley students need to be successful in reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. Beyond these foundations, please select up to 4 skills you believe students need to be ready for life after high school. The one that breached majority here is financial literacy and managing money. Followed in kind of the second tier, training in CTE courses, communicating effectively in small and large groups, and managing stress, developing strong mental health. Where respondents are less concerned, speaking more than one language, and then a set that was quite close. Appreciation for the fine arts, setting and maintaining goals even in difficult times, AI, responsible risk taking, self advocacy, integrity, and service learning or volunteerism. Same exercise once again. Made a list for staff top to bottom in terms of graduate success, parents and non-parents, non-staff. Based on the 3 groups, the number one priority for students to be successful after high school and where the district can make sure that students are successful after graduation is in financial literacy and managing money. It was the number one priority across all 3 groups. Now we're going into staff specific questions. So these questions only appeared in the survey if I identified myself as an employee of the district. We'll begin with the indexes, but we're on a familiar scale, 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. Those staff indexes are all well above 3. In fact, kind of getting into the strongly agree range here in terms of support. I have the support I need to help educate our students and work as a team, but really relatively high scores across all of these indexes. And you can also see that borne out in the comparison percentiles. Spring Valley is outperforming 94% of other districts in terms of the support index, 91% of other districts in academics, and then Spring Valley is outperforming approximately 3/4 of other districts in terms of staff engagement, students experience, and staff experience. Continuing with these staff specific questions, I wanted to talk about a few of the questions that feed in those indexes. And I wanted to specifically focus on the 5 highest scoring staff items. Staff feel safe at work. They feel like they're doing a good job of educating students. They have access to the support tech support they need. They have healthy working relationships with coworkers, and most days they look forward to going to work. Now, this certainly isn't the only questions that are in the staff survey, but a few important notes here. We like to think that all questions are equal in the staff survey, but there are certainly some questions that are more important than others. What I'm looking for here, and a very good piece of news, is that some questions that you have to have in place before you make progress in any other area are here. A different way of saying that is if staff don't feel safe at work, if they don't feel effective in their jobs, if they don't feel like they get along with their coworkers and don't look forward to going to work, it is very, very, very difficult to make progress in other areas. The good news here, the really good news, is that Spring Valley already cleared that hurdle. So staff already feel safe, they feel effective, they get along with one another, they look forward to going to work. So what this is telling me is Spring Valley has set themselves up well to fix the things that aren't going as well. That's what are presented on this slide. Now, the good news here is that, well, good and bad news. The good news is that no items are below 3. So every item in the staff survey, staff were leaning towards agreement. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't places to work on. When you make a list, something's got to be at the top, something's got to be at the bottom. The staff are saying, as we look to fix things, staff are looking for help in meeting students' social and emotional needs. Staff want the district to seek input from a broad group of staff members. They want to ensure that that input is valued. They're looking to make sure that student discipline is handled consistently and that pay practices are fair. So once again, the good news here is that no items are below 3, which is not normal in a good way. But Staff are still asking for help in particular areas. These are the areas where staff are requesting additional priorities and resources to fix these areas that are at the bottom of their scores. A slightly different way of looking at this data. Which staff items have the highest comparisons? Now, the piece of really good news here is these 5 items that you see up on your screen, nobody is outperforming Spring Valley. Spring Valley outperformed every single other school district in their comparison pool and therefore landed at the 99th percentile. Really, really good news. Again, nobody is outperforming from the staff's perspective Spring Valley on any of these items. Highest scoring district in their pool. On the other side of that coin, even some of the items that aren't going quite as well in terms of comparison to other schools are going quite well. Spring Valley, even in the lowest comparisons, Spring Valley is outperforming 2/3 of other districts in the first 2 rows here. Training and support to work with students from different backgrounds, and the social and emotional needs of all students are being met. So even though you heard just a couple of slides ago that social emotional, that's one of the items that staff most want the district to focus on. It was the bottom item, but Spring Valley is still outperforming 2/3 of other districts in that area. So you really have to take this data all together. It doesn't mean staff don't want help in that area. They do. The other part of this is also true. Spring Valley is still outperforming most of their peers in that area. So you have to take the whole story together in terms of the raw score and the comparison. The one item that does stick out here a bit, Spring Valley is outperforming 22% of other districts in terms of staff input is valued. 78% of districts, therefore, are outperforming Spring Valley on that area. So once again, that's kind of hearing that item in stereo. Staff really want to ensure that staff input is valued when they provide it. Finally, the last section we're going to isolate are questions for parents. Similar to staff, you saw these questions only if you identified yourself as a parent on the survey. The parent indexes, forward above across the board. Really strong place to start here. Parents are leaning towards strongly agreement in multiple areas here. And Spring Valley is outperforming most other districts on all of these indexes. About 2/3 to 3/4. Spring Valley is outperforming about 2/3 to 3/4 of other districts on these indexes, including the highest comparison. Informed, I am kept up to date on my child's progress and what's happening at school. That first row, Spring Valley is outperforming 75% of other districts on that index. But let's take a look at some of those questions. Same scale, 1 to 5. The highest scoring parent items were all north of 4. School facilities are clean and well kept. My child feels safe at school. If my child breaks a rule at school, they are treated fairly. I am updated on how my child is doing at school. And overall, my child is able to handle the emotional challenges of school. Much like staff, there are some questions that are ultra important if you want to make progress in other areas. That item here, my child feels safe at school. When we look at the biggest mover, what most impacts a parent's satisfaction with their child's school, perhaps unsurprisingly, the number one factor that affects whether parents are satisfied is whether their child feels safe at school once they drop them off there during the day. The good news is that Spring Valley is already scoring high in that area, so it is setting up the district well to begin focusing on other areas that aren't going quite as well. And that's what you see here. Now, again, even the lower scoring items are still almost approaching 4. So even the items that aren't going as well, relatively speaking, are going pretty well. But much like the staff, I don't want to downplay where parents are asking for additional help. At the bottom of their list, their lowest scoring items, the school's efforts to address bullying, having the opportunities to provide feedback to the school and teachers, the school providing opportunities for parental involvement, that school communication being both timely and transparent, and having a healthy culture at our school. So, not to sound like a broken record, but I want to honor what parents have requested additional help in. But these scores are still relatively quite high. The highest comparisons, what items is Spring Valley most outperforming others? Outperforming 93% of other districts on whether a parent feels updated on how their child is doing at school. At the 87th percentile for the school teaching with materials that reflect families' cultural and racial backgrounds. The 86th percentile for a child getting help when they need it. 83rd percentile for knowing how to support their child's learning. And then finally, the 82nd percentile for overall my child is able to handle the emotional challenges of school. Where are the lowest comparisons? One item, you're still outperforming most other districts. You're above the median at 59th at the 59th percentile. I am satisfied with our school's efforts to address bullying. There are two items where Spring Valley is right smack dab in the middle of the data set once again. Half of districts are outperforming Spring Valley. Spring Valley is outperforming the other half of districts. That is, I have at least one school staff member I feel comfortable contacting when I have an idea or concern, and most days my child enjoys going to school. The other two items at the 39th percentile, I feel welcome in my child's school, and school staff treat my child with dignity and respect. That wraps up the report. Thanks so much for listening.